Good morning, everyone. I'm sure all of you know what this is. A penny is the lowest denomination of money in the United States. And there has been so much discussion over such a little thing. Did you know the materials that make up this coin are worth more than the monetary value it represents? There has been talk of getting rid of the penny altogether, but I really don't think that's going to happen. For those of us who live in America, I have a question for you. Just what is a penny worth to you? What if I asked you for a favor and told you that in return I would give you a brand new penny? Maybe two. Would you care? What if you worked really hard at your job and when it came time to divvy out the raises, you were told you'd get 3 more cents an hour? Would you be excited or feel that you had wasted your time and your talent? Not many of us are willing to work very hard if our reward is only a penny, no matter how shiny it is. What most people don't see is that these pennies hold within them great potential. You see this? If saved, invested, or treated properly, can very easily turn into this. I didn't make this video to talk to you today about money and how to invest it. Rather, I would like to talk to you today about something that some people view equally as worthless: human life, specifically the lives of the unborn. There are people out there that feel as if the unborn mean just about as much as one of these. An abortion is one of the most evil things that have come out of the human race to date. When we have a system in place to allow for the slaughter of innocent lives, and a culture that not only accepts this, but defends their right to end the life of another with no valid reason, you know something is very wrong. Now, I live in Maryland, and I tried to do some digging about a yearly abortion count. Unfortunately, Maryland is a state that does not report the number of abortions performed yearly. The last number that I found was from 2014. That number is 28,140. Think about that for a second. 28,000 lives killed for no good reason. That number is more than the death count of many of the American wars. The Revolutionary War claimed 25,000 American lives and another 25,000 wounded. This war lasted about 8 years, so if we take into account those killed and wounded, it would be about 6,200 and some per year. World War I cost 53,400 lives and wounded 63,000 some others, totaling around 116,500. This war lasted for 2 years, which means yearly around 58,000 lives were taken. World War II claimed 291,500 and some American lives, wounding 113,800 and some others. American involvement in World War II lasted for 5 years, which works out to about 81,000 lives per year. The American Civil War. Now surely this war will be higher than the abortion rate because, after all, both sides were American. The U.S. Army lost 140,400 some lives in combat and 224,000 lives outside of combat. The Confederate Army lost 74,500 in combat and 225,000 outside of combat. The Civil War lasted for 5 years, which brings our yearly total to 72,900 some dead for the U.S. Army and around 58,000 for the Confederates. Now, if you've been paying even somewhat close attention to the numbers that I've rattled off, you've noticed that many of them were higher than 28,000 per year. But there's a problem with my math. The numbers I listed for the yearly counts of American lives taken in all of these wars were on a nationwide scale. the 28,000 lives claimed by abortion were strictly limited to Maryland. That changes the numbers quite drastically. Planned Parenthood performs most of these abortions, operating under the guise of women's health. Now, I would hope that you could see how killing unborn women would be very counterproductive to their health. For years, society has tried to push the idea that unborn children are not people, just a clump of cells. Recently, however, with the invention of 3D and now 4D ultrasounds, it is quite clear that is not the case. But Jesus had told us long before ultrasounds were even a thing that life begins at conception. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Isaiah chapter 49 verse 5. The Lord called me from the womb. From the body of my mother, he named me. Now those are just two of the verses in the Old Testament that show life exists within the womb. The New Testament also has many verses that claim the same thing. Galatians 1, verse 15. When he who has set me apart before I was born, and has called me by his grace. Luke chapter 1, verses 15 through 17. He will be great before the Lord. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit, even in his mother's womb. Again, these are only two verses among the many in the New Testament that proclaim the sanctity of life. Getting back to the societal view that a life is not even worth one of these until it reaches 24 weeks. In the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, on multiple occasions, a surgery has been performed on a baby while still in utero. At least one of these surgeries was an emergency heart surgery performed at 20 weeks. That's a whole month earlier than what most people think is the threshold for viability. If we look at the development chart, we can see that by 3 weeks, the baby has a working heart that pumps the child's own blood type, different from the mother's. On the other side of the coin, no pun intended, we have Planned Parenthood, literally pulling these children apart to remove them from the womb and then selling the pieces. My heart bleeds for these children and the parents, and I cannot fathom the evil that is paraded around as women's health being demanded as a right. If you're still with me, then I would like to touch on the reasons people use for the pro-abortion argument. I almost said the logic that people use, but let's face it, there's nothing logical about killing an innocent child, no matter your reasoning. One of the things people use in the pro-abortion discussion is my body, my choice. The only problem with this argument is that it isn't really the mother's body that's at stake. What about the baby's body? Shouldn't the same argument apply? Baby's body, baby's choice. And I highly doubt any of them would agree to those terms. But there is another part of the equation that this argument leaves out. The father plays a critical part in the making of a child. Yes, the mother carries the baby, but without a father, there would be no baby to carry. Doesn't he get a say in the potential death of his child? I have 2 children, and I would gladly give my life in return for theirs. This is part of the male role within the family. Like it or not, guys, our job is to bust our butts working so that we can provide for and protect our family. And if that protection calls for our lives, then so be it. If this video hasn't ruffled enough feathers already, I'm sure that that last statement alone has. And I have much more to say about gender and the roles that come with them, but that is for a different video. Stay tuned. Another argument that is used by those who are pro-choice is that they just are not able to support their child, and rather than raise a child in a life of poverty, they have an abortion. Once again, I'm sure if you were to ask any child, would they rather have less toys and hand-me-down clothing, or die, none of them would choose the latter. If you can't give your child the basic necessities of life, adoption is always an option. However, when we take into account what most people view as a substandard living situation or a state of poverty, it really is quite comical. Most people feel that living without cable TV, internet, and name brand clothing constitutes a substandard way of life. Another argument similar to this one comes along with the modern technology we see today. These days, doctors are able to tell in utero if a child will have a life-altering or threatening disease, and rather than allow a substandard quality of life, they have an abortion. I happen to have a medically complex child. My wife and I, as a result of this, know many others with similar children. So I can personally attest that many children with these diseases live happier lives than the majority of healthy children. These pro-choice advocates who use this quality of life argument seriously need to review the standards of quality they use for a benchmark. There are, of course, other arguments for pro-choice. Having already addressed the clump of cells argument, many others are barely worth addressing. Arguments like, "I'm just not ready to have children." Well, you were certainly ready to do the things that led up to being pregnant. Why do you punish the child for your bad decisions? Some people claim that having a child at whatever point in life they find themselves would mess up their career, their future goals, or various other personal, selfish things that they have set in mind for their future. Again, I ask you, what about the future goals of the child? Who knows what we have lost with these children never given the chance at life? Perhaps one of them would have grown up to be a great artist, a sports figure, perhaps a scientist who would discover something that would change the way we see the world. It has been credited to multiple people, so I'm not sure who said it. But the story goes like this. Someone will inevitably ask, if God exists, why are there such horrible, incurable diseases in the world? And the answer is given to them, you aborted the person who would have come up with the cure. I touched on this earlier, but this is the development of a child in the womb. The law says it's okay to kill a child as long as it has not lived past so many weeks. I say lived because the unborn child is no less alive than you or I. Now, various states have differing opinions of these limits. I mentioned prior in this video the benchmark of 24 weeks. This is what the majority of people believe that line in the sand is. Before that time frame, many hospitals and care centers will not even attempt to help or save a child. From what I could tell, the law in Maryland does not give this 24-week mark, rather says that discretion is left up to the doctor in charge. That's a scary thought. As I mentioned earlier, at 3 weeks, the baby's heart is functioning, pumping a blood that differs from the blood type of the mother. The spinal cord, nervous system, and multiple organs have begun to form. By week 6, arms, legs, and eyes are now forming, and brain waves can be detected. At week 8, organs have positioned themselves in their proper place within the body. The child has fingerprints and can now hear. That's at 8 weeks, not even half of the way to this 24-week viability mark, and we have arms, legs, organs, a nervous system, and brain waves. Even before a person can tell they're pregnant, a new life is there, forming and growing. It doesn't matter if that child is 3 weeks or 30 weeks. There's never a valid reason to abort a child.
I'd like to leave you with one last thing. Trying to comprehend exactly how vast 28,000 abortions a year can be is a little hard. I've tried to put it into perspective with the number of deaths relative to the wars that we have fought throughout history, but how could I express just the immense vastness of the 28,000 lives lost for literally no good reason? Society deems that these things are worthless. just as the pro-choice movement views unborn life. That is a lot of lives. So many needless deaths. I wish I could tell you that this is what 28,000 lives look like. However, it isn't. Not even close. Is that 28,000 starting to sink in yet? Well, guess what? We still have not hit the 28,000 mark. This is thankfully the last of it. There are a few reasons that I decided to split up the pennies into 3 groups. The practical one is I could not physically lift the 5-gallon bucket when it held all 28,000 pennies. In much the same way, we are not able to carry the ever-increasing weight of our sins in this lifetime. Thankfully, we don't have to. Jesus Christ has taken care of the weight. He has placed it on himself. No matter how much we drag behind us in our daily lives, Jesus has offered us a way to be free. The price has already been paid, and the gates to heaven are now open to all of those who seek him. Feel free to comment below, no matter what side of this argument you fall on. Being so outspoken on such a controversial issue, I don't expect to get all positive and loving feedback, but I encourage healthy discussion from both sides. If you would like to share this video with others, please do so. You won't win the lottery if you do, and you won't have bad luck for 10 years if you don't. The bottom line is that the unborn have no voice, so someone needs to stand up for them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got pennies to roll.